The old woman in the attic. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I enjoyed scary stories and urban legends, but I always chalked them up to overactive imaginations and coincidences. That was until I moved into my current house. It started with small things I could explain away. Lights flickered randomly, sometimes shutting off and turning back on when I was in the room. I blamed old wiring. Occasionally, I caught the distinct scent of cigarette smoke, thick and acrid, lingering in the air. No one in my house smoked. No one in my neighborhood smoked, at least not close enough for the smell to travel. Maybe it was just my imagination. Then my dog started acting strangely. At night, he would growl at empty corners, barking at something I couldn't see. He refused to enter certain rooms, his ears flat against his head, his tail between his legs. I dismissed it at first. Dogs are weird sometimes, right? But then came the nightmares. I started waking up at odd hours, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering. I had no recollection of what I had dreamt about, only a lingering feeling of being watched, an oppressive weight pressing down on my chest. I tried telling myself it was just stress. Moving into a new home was an adjustment. It had to be in my head. Then came the incident in 2019. I had hired a landscaper to clean up my front yard. The trees were overgrown, their limbs stretching toward the house like grasping fingers. I stood in the kitchen, watching him work through the window. He was a middle-aged man, tanned and muscular from years of outdoor labor. After a while, I decided to step outside and offer him a drink. He didn't hear me approach. He was staring up at the house, his expression unreadable. His gaze was fixed on the attic window, a small, oval-shaped decorative window at the very top of the house. When I finally spoke, he startled, his face pale. "You okay?" I asked, handing him a bottle of water. He hesitated before answering, his voice uneasy. "Yeah, just... who's that lady up there?" I frowned. "What lady?" He pointed up at the attic window. "The old woman. She's been watching me work for the last half hour." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "There's no one else in the house," I said slowly. He gave me a strange look. "I swear I saw her. White hair, pale face. She was just standing there." I turned and stared up at the window. It was empty. But what truly made my blood run cold was a realization that struck me like a punch to the gut. That window had no floor beneath it. The attic was unfinished, just wooden beams and insulation. Whoever the landscaper had seen had been standing on nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined an old woman standing in the attic, peering down at me through the cracks in the ceiling. Was she watching me now? Waiting? I finally forced myself to investigate. Armed with nothing but my phone's flashlight, I climbed the creaky pull-down ladder to the attic. Dust swirled in the dim light, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and something faintly metallic. The attic was as I remembered, unfinished, with exposed wooden beams and no flooring except for a narrow walkway of plywood. I shone my flashlight toward the window. Nothing, just cobwebs and dust. Then my phone battery dropped from 50% to 1% in an instant, and the light cut out. The attic plunged into darkness. Something moved behind me, a shuffling sound like fabric brushing against wood. My breath hitched, and I turned too quickly, my foot slipping between the beams. I barely caught myself before I crashed through the ceiling into the floor below. Heart hammering, I scrambled back down the ladder and slammed the attic hatch shut, my fingers trembling. I barely slept that night. The following days, things escalated. Shadows flitted past my peripheral vision. The smell of cigarettes grew stronger, clinging to my clothes and hair. I heard whispers, not words, just the faint murmur of a voice when I was alone. My dog refused to go upstairs anymore. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate. They paced back and forth, directly over my bed, exactly where the attic window was. I lay frozen, my breath shallow. My mind raced for explanations. An animal? Number. The movements were too precise, too human. Gathering every ounce of courage, I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a single distinct knock came from the attic hatch. I bolted upright, my pulse a deafening roar in my ears. The knock came again, louder this time. My dog whimpered from the foot of the bed. And then, the hatch creaked open. I didn't see anything. I didn't wait to see anything. I grabbed my dog and ran out of the house, not stopping until I reached my car. I spent the night in a motel. The next morning, I called a local historian, desperate for answers. What I learned still haunts me to this day. The previous owner of the house had